Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Thriving Minds podcast with your host, Walter Parada, where we strive to provide you with empowering talks so you can live to thrive. I hope you find yourself in the right frame of mind, focusing on all the things within your control. All right, so today's episode, we're going to be talking about breaking free from correctness and just aiming to do. In general, there's a sense of correctness that we all are kind of conditioned to abide by. And this is things like rules and regulations that are put into place. These things serve a purpose to ensure safety. Think about driving out on the road. Traffic lights are there to keep cars moving in an orderly fashion while others are stopping. And this allows for a continued flow of cars moving, and it helps to ensure that everyone remains safe. Or if you just think about electrical or building or housing codes, these are all needed to ensure that buildings are safe. You can use the electrical systems without being in danger. You can live in the house or be in the building without it collapsing. In these scenarios, they are a vital part to ensure just the overall health and safety of people. And in some cases, it is life or death. But away from this, there are so many scenarios in which there are so many different ways of doing things. And it doesn't all have to be correct or incorrect, right or wrong, because this kind of conditions us to see things in absolute manners. Meaning that if it's not this way, then it can't be done. If it's not a particular way, then it's not going to work. And this becomes a focal point of how we're thinking and how we operate. It really limits what we can do, which affects our confidence and belief within ourselves. The general thinking of, am I doing this correctly? If the answer is yes, then we proceed with taking action and doing so. But if the answer is no, then many times we don't even try because of the fear of being wrong, of doing things incorrectly, and this chips away at our enthusiasm. Just think of some of the more elementary things that we face or that we faced before. From an early age, we go to school and we're taught many different things, such as how to count numbers so we can eventually do math, how to pronounce letters, and how to write them so we can become literate. This gives us the basis for how to do things in a standard way that allows many different systems to operate efficiently. To know what you're buying and what to pay for, such as reading the ingredients in the shampoo that you're considering using and determining if you're willing to pay the price for what you consider acceptable ingredients and the price. Is to become educated so you can search for relevant information to help you make well-informed decisions. So in school, the teachers review the work that we do to let us know if we're doing it correct or not. If we do it correct, then we get approval through positive reinforcement such as encouragement or some sort of good grade. And this helps us to continue down that same path. But if we do it incorrectly, then we're shown how to do it in the correct manner. And sometimes it can be shaming a person to fear being incorrect, fear making the wrong choice. Naturally, when we experience being incorrect, it invokes fear into us because it's directly valuing our skill set or our abilities, letting us know that we've fallen short. And this is just part of the survival mechanism that we all have, to avoid being hurt so we can remain the same. So just think about our ancestors and them choosing something incorrect, such as eating the wrong fruits that were poisonous. That could lead to sickness and possibly death. So this same feeling applies to when we do something that is considered incorrect. It can cause that state of fear and panic that makes us feel bad about ourselves. So think back to when a teacher is teaching and she asked the class a question with a correct or incorrect answer. Many times, those students that choose to try to answer the question in front of others will do so when they are confident that they can answer it correctly. If a student doesn't feel confident that they have the correct answer, they'll just stay silent because they want to avoid being embarrassed. So this thinking will trickle into our everyday lives. Like mentioned before, if we feel confident that we can do something correctly, we'll move forward with taking action. And if not, we'll just remain silent to do nothing and stuck in place. But in many things that we come across, this actually limits what we can do. Just because you're not able to do something well right now is not an indication that you're unable to do it. This is where we need to kind of get out of that correctness in a general sense. There's a time and a place for that, such as traffic lights and signs to ensure that you keep yourself and others safe. But there are other times that you got to just let go of that restricting feeling to just go ahead and move forward with what you're thinking about. So if you want to play a particular sport such as soccer, you want to play an instrument, and you're not sure whether you can do it correctly, this is the exact time to throw that out the window and just do it. In these situations, it's not life or death, being safe or not. It's simply wanting to do something that you're interested in, and the results should not be the focus, but instead it should be about the sheer joy of the process. Generally, we start playing sports or playing an instrument because it's fun, not how correctly we can do it. But then over time, that very reason why we started doing it, we tend to forget about it because of being conditioned to do it correctly. And this takes away at the joy of what we do that slowly puts out that fire, that enthusiasm that makes us great. And great in this sense does not mean a result, but a quality in how you operate. We need to remember this, the great qualities we each have, and build around that. Just because you're good at something does not mean it's a great quality. Someone could be good at getting others to deliver great results, but if they're ridiculing and demeaning them just to motivate them, then this is harmful to a person's self-worth. That's a bad quality. This is a very good example of how correctness limits what can be done, because people will be motivated by fear, constantly needing negative stimulation for them to take action. So then when good things do happen, those people that have been conditioned by being demeaned and put down are less likely to do anything about it and will actually shun it because they expect what is good is unwanted because of the unfamiliarity with it. It distorts a person's perspective, merely focused on what can go wrong, and what a person focuses on is what the reality becomes. I can remember when I worked in agriculture, there was a time when we had many good harvest seasons, and throughout the harvest season, I'd get these reports, and it would mainly just be amongst other sites that we delivered to. They needed those results to get an idea of what was coming in. It was kept on a need-to-know basis, but the people who actually ensured the quality in the production were many of the field workers, as they would maintain the fields to ensure a good crop was being produced. They would remove impure varieties from reproducing and taking out off types during the sorting process just before it was shipped. Many of these field workers were informed very little of the results that were delivered, if at all. Yet they were largely impacted by their great work. So this one harvest season, at the end of it, the results came back, and it was about 80 different varieties of corn. All of them passed the purity inspection test, which meant that each variety scored above a 97.5% purity percentage. So each variety had at least 97.5% pure genetic seed, and this helps to ensure uniformity throughout the growing season that contributes to reliable, high yields consistently. So I meet with the crews in a meeting room and show them the results of what they contributed to. They were happy to be included. That helped build further trust amongst the team. And I remember one of the crew leaders at the end of the meeting said she felt relieved because she thought that they were called in to be reprimanded. And this just confirmed my suspicion that maybe not just there, but many other places, superior bosses, whatever you call them, the higher ups, the chain of command, tend to only communicate with their team members when they need something done or when something wrong happens and they have something negative to say, basically calling out the subordinates and blaming them. This is so typical of when things go wrong, finding somebody to blame, to deflect responsibility, to not look bad, and usually this flows downhill. And all of this kind of starts from that correctness, and people will behave based on that. It's basically operating from a place of fear being incorrect. And then when it is done right, the only thing that is to be experienced is relief instead of joy. It's just that restricting feeling that becomes tighter and tighter, that becomes more and more suffocating. But that comment by the crew leader saying she was fearing being reprimanded was very depressing. Her and probably all her co-workers, everybody there at the site and who knows where else, have probably been conditioned like this. So when they do well, they probably don't hear a word from anybody because that's what's expected. And that's fine, all right. If that's what's expected, at least provide some encouragement. But the good thing is you can do things to get out of that, to be conditioned to operate in a more empowering way. The first thing that you can do to take a break from those limitations is to understand there are multiple ways to do things, multiple solutions. Think about the many ways that people choose to make a living. There are those that work the traditional jobs of working for an employer, working from 9 to 5, or maybe they work in the evenings, maybe they work part-time. But then there are other people who decide to run their own business, or maybe people who decide to do both, work for somebody else and run their own business. It could be making a living as an inventor, selling ideas, managing investments. Or it could be working for a period of time and then stop working, living off of a good financial plan or living with relatives to reduce expenses. Is there a correct way to make a living or a correct way to live? No, there are many ways to make a living or how to live. This is totally subjective. I can remember when my mom wanted to get a divorce from my dad, she had many people urging her not to. And one specific close friend at the time told her to stay with my dad even though he was an alcoholic. And my mom's friend explained that kids whose parents are divorced are more likely to be delinquents. This obviously upset my mom, and in the end, my sister and I, we didn't become delinquents. Later, that friend of my mom apologized for saying that. And I think she was coming from a place of fear. Yeah, there are statistics that back that up, but that's not the whole story. My mom didn't abide by a specific correct way of living. She identified that the way the marriage was going to be a bad influence on her kids. So she decided to figure out another way to set my sister and I up for a more suitable environment that would aid in our development. My mom's friend had her version of what living correct was for her and wanted to impose her ideas or her opinion onto my mom. This just shows that you got to do what works for you. Just because it works for one person doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Their correctness is not your correctness. And in fact, break free from that. So you got to be able to pivot when you realize that. And this relates to the decisions that you make. It's not so much a correct or incorrect decision. It's just a certain decision was made that led to a particular outcome. So let's say, for example, you're trying to decide on investing in the stock of Apple versus Monster Energy drink. Because we're kind of conditioned from a young age to kind of pick the right answer, it boxes us into thinking there's only one correct choice. While in fact, it proves that there are multiple, not say correct choices, but different choices that work out well. Some better than others, but still good choices. If you would have invested $1,000 in the stock of Apple in 2006, today it'd be worth about $103,000. If you would have invested $1,000 in the stock of Monster in 2006, it'd be worth about $31,000. And if you would have invested $500 in each of the stocks, then the total would be worth $66,000. Which one is the correct answer? Well, there isn't one. It's just that there are different outcomes that occurred from each scenario. If you asked back then, in 2006, what stock choice between the two would yield the highest return, then the obvious answer is Apple. But back then, you didn't have the answers of what would generate the highest return. It's simply forecasting how each stock would perform based on so many different factors. And correct answers are based on known information. So picking the stock with the highest return back then, the correct choice did not exist. That's like saying the correct choice is to take the new job overseas or remain at the current job? The answer is yet to be determined, and the answer may change based on a certain time in your life and when it was selected. Maybe in the beginning, remaining at the current job may be seen as the correct choice because it provides stability and comfort. But then maybe 6 years later, it could feel like remaining at that same job can seem like the incorrect choice because of missing out on new opportunity for exciting experiences. See, it's trying to quantify correctness in information that is not yet known. If we go back to the stock market scenario, if you would have invested $1,000 in the year 2000 in the stock of Apple, it'd be worth $289,000 today. But if you would have invested $1,000 in the year 2000 in the stock of Monster Energy, it would be worth $1.1 million today. If you would have invested $500 in each of the stocks of Apple and Monster, it'd be worth a little over $700,000 combined. This just illustrates the point at different times there's going to be different perspectives that changes what is deemed correct. So instead of picking the one right answer, aim to be satisfied with what you've chosen and done based on the information at hand. There are so many unknowns, and waiting to have the answers before moving forward leaves missing out on what could be. Things may work out well or they may not, but that does not mean it was correct or incorrect, depending on how you look at it. It's easy to say after the fact that you should have chosen the other options. This then can linger going forward as the tendency to second guess the decision right in front of you becomes more and more overwhelming. When you get out of being boxed in by correctness, it's going to help you move past mistakes to avoid dwelling on them, and you'll see them more as teaching moments that you can apply going forward. Maybe the thinking could be, I made the incorrect choice of buying the cheaper tires for my car, and they didn't last as long as the more expensive ones. But maybe that's what I could afford at the time. What if the more expensive tires lasted one more year? But what if that would have put me back financially that limits getting ahead? What if in going with the cheaper tires, I could save money to invest that grows over time as opposed to having less because of the expensive tires? Correctness keeps us restricted. That can invoke fear of making a mistake. Just staying in place, hoping nothing bad happens. But in making choices and taking action in which you're satisfied with, you always have the power to pivot for the better. It's knowing that things are fluid and can change. I really like the quote, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is now. And this signifies that you can always do something about things right now. So use the past as a reference point where you can learn from it. And the more creative and imaginative you are, the more that you're able to get out of the correctness. So do things that unleash that skill set and develop it as it's going to help to unwind from needing to do things correctly and avoiding doing them incorrectly. Just know that as you're incorporating this, it may seem like it's a waste of time in certain moments because of what seems like lack of productivity or results, but that's going to help unwind from needing to operate in a specific way. To just do things and see what happens because of sheer curiosity. And the more you allow curiosity to lead the way, the less and less concerned you are with what really is correct. And this really drives change for the better. It will be messy at times, but it's going to be super beneficial in the long run. You know, it's doing simple things such as drawing or painting, molding things out of clay, really anything that lets it do it your way. You know, one time I was in a meeting with my coworkers and we were discussing the plan for the upcoming week. And as I'm writing on the dry erase board, I write my lowercase e's from bottom to top. And one of the coworkers tells me, "You write your e's backwards." And I looked at her and asked, "What do you mean?" But I knew what she was implying. And what she says to me is that e's are supposed to be written from the middle. You make that horizontal line to the right and curve it counterclockwise to end up at the bottom to give you that lowercase e. I wasn't going to dispute with her, but I came away with the thinking of how limiting that is. Does it really matter how I wrote my E? If somebody else and I can read it, then it means it's sufficient. Does it matter if you earn $6 million invested in stocks or running a trucking business? I would say no. There's no correct way to make $6 million. But that moment helped me realize that most people are conditioned to think things are only done in a certain manner. And if it's not done according to that manner, then that means it's incorrect. It's insufficient. So anything other than what they expect means that there's a malfunction in how I think and how I operate. But while they may see it like that, I see it as being limitless, seeing all the possibilities of what could be. And I think that person continued to work there because that's kind of their thinking, only doing what they were taught or what they were told. When I eventually moved on and left the company, it's usually customary at that work site to make that announcement to everyone during the morning meetings. And when I said I'm moving on to a different company, a lot of people were surprised because most people that move on from that site just go on to different roles within the company. But because I took a different path, it was unfamiliar territory for how were they processing things. So getting out of that correctness allows you to take different paths, those unique routes that are less common, that really opens you up to very special and wonderful experiences. Yes, there will be pain points along the way, but that's merely in the short and medium term. Correctness has a time and a place. It has a purpose to ensure that things are done in an organized manner to make things operate efficiently and safely. But it's also understanding that not everything needs to be done in a form of correctness. If that were the case, then many wonderful things would not have been invented. Those minds that created so many wonderful things were because they were not bound by the standards in place. Maybe some of them saw ways to improve things, or maybe they were just curious in other ways that things could be done. Or maybe it was through mistakes that these discoveries were made. Following correctness is basically going to get you the same results. But when you can let creativity and imagination lead the way, you can reach new levels that pave the way for something truly wonderful. Walt Disney is a wonderful example of this, and it's evidenced by the path that he took. He dropped out of school in the 9th grade, and maybe that allowed his curiosity to lead the way. From pioneering sound in animated films to successfully producing the first film in color to leading the way in theme parks in general. And all of the successes that he had were based on the things that he didn't know, but he had enough initiative and curiosity to figure it out. And when he was looking at building Disneyland, he hired engineers who told him his vision could not be done. Eventually, Walt was fed up with what they deemed correct because that was what they were taught. That was what they were trained to do, to not think or do beyond what they know. But because Walt did not operate based on what's correct, that's what gave way to the uniqueness of the Disney theme parks. And that set a great example for many others. Pioneers like Walt Disney are what give way to innovation that improves the quality of our lives. Their willingness to not conform to standards and rules that are put into place are what deeply impact our lives for the better. So the next time someone tells you what you did is incorrect, ask them, help me out, and if not, get out of my way because I'm making my own path. You're either going to help me or move out the way. You don't need to follow someone else to make yourself feel good. And if others try to put you down, let them know that there are many ways to get things done. And right now, it's just taking a little longer to get there. Let yourself be who you are, as there's no correct way to do so. Just many different ways. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're interested in more topics like this, become a Thriving Minds member at www.thrivingminds.live. It's your personal development resource so you can build that right mindset so you can live to thrive. All right, until next time.